Today I want to tell you a quiet play moving story. It's about Luca, a young Apache man, and a shepherd girl who dared to love him. Their journey wasn't easy, but it led them to a life they chose together. If this story touches your heart, leave a comment below. Now, let me begin. The wind came down from the north that morning, dry and restless. It carried the scent of dust, moss wet blossoms, and the low murmur of sheep grazing near the bend of the San Pedro. June Mercer stood barefoot at the edge of the creek, toes sunk into the soft mud, watching the current twist through the rocks. She'd been out since dawn, pretending to check on the herd, though her real reason waited with the rising sun. Luca always came through around this time. Not every day. He wasn't predictable like that, but often enough that June knew the rhythm. He moved through the world like water slipping over stone. Quiet, sure, always with purpose. He never lingered in town, and never smiled unless he meant it. A man of few words and fewer explanations. She'd first seen him the summer before, bringing furs down from the ridge to trade at the general store. Then again in autumn, helping a wounded colt near the river flats, and then again enough times that her thoughts had started to circle him like moths around lamplight. But Luca didn't look her way like the other men did. Didn't they try to flatter or tease? They glance her direction, nod once, and keep walking. That more than anything had lodged under her skin like a thorn. So this morning, she waited, not by accident, not by fate. She chose the place carefully, where the trail bent close to the water, just past the tall yucca, and she'd chosen her moment just as carefully. At the edge of the creek, June stripped down to the slip she wore under her work dress. The water was cold, startling, but it bit her skin in a way that made her feel awake and brave. She stepped into the current slowly, arms hugging herself, long brown hair clinging to her back in the morning damp. The herd grazed uphill, boughs soft, distant. For a time there was only the wind and the water. Then came hoofbeats. Soft at first, then clearer. She didn't turn around. Not right away. Just listened. The sound of a single horse-led gait. She knew it was him. When Luca came into view, riding his dun mare with the calm of someone born in the saddle. He pulled up short. His eyes flicked to her, then away just as fast. He turned his head, shielding his gaze. June didn't flinch. She walked slowly out of the water. Droplets sliding down her arms, her thin slip nearly transparent in the morning light. She picked up the towel she'd left on the rock, but didn't wrap it around herself just yet. You've seen me undressed, she said, her voice calm, but clear. Now you must marry me. Luca stayed quiet. A long moment passed. The mare shifted beneath him. I didn't mean to say anything, he said at last, his voice low, almost rough. Y llegó, June stepped closer. He meant for you too. That got his attention. He turned then, not with desire in his eyes, but something closer to cage weariness. You what? I knew you'd pass this way. He knew the light would catch you before it caught me. He knew you'd look. Why? Because I wanted you to notice me. Because I got tired of waiting for someone like you to speak first. Luca dismounted slowly. His boots touched the dirt with a soft thud. He kept a respectful distance, his gaze now steady, but guarded. Do you think this is a game? June shook her head. No, I think this is the only way you'd let yourself be seen. The silence between them grew heavier. Luca looked past her toward the hills. I'm Apache, he said simply. That matters to folks around here. I'm not folks, June replied. He looked back at her. Really? Looked for the first time, not just at her damp hair or bare arms, but at the fierce, proud way she stood without shame, at the steadiness in her eyes. She wasn't a girl playing at boldness. She was a woman who knew what she wanted and had dared to ask for it. He exhaled slowly. I don't marry because someone plays a trick on me. June smiled. Then don't call it marriage. Call it noticing. Luca studied her a moment longer, then gave a slight nod. All right, I noticed. She wrapped the towel around herself then, not in shame, but as a signal. The moment had passed. The line had been crossed. She turned toward the sheep, slowly climbing the far slope. Good, she said. That's a start. Without waiting, she walked back toward her camp, water still dripping from her hem. Luca stood watching for a moment more, then mounted his horse and rode on. But his path curved wider than usual that day, and his eyes now and then flicked back toward the creek. The sun was higher now, pressing down on the dry ridges and rocky trails that snaked above the San Pedro. Luca kept to the north slope, where the shade lingered longer, the trees thicker. He rode without hurry, but his mind wandered far from the trail. He meant to forget that morning by the creek. Meant to file it away like all the other strange things he'd seen in his 30 years. Wild horses moving like ghosts at twilight. Rivers running red from spring flood. Lightning that seen the sky aflame. But June Mercer her bare shoulders in morning light. Her voice calm and she would not leave his thoughts. He didn't believe in tricks. Life had trained him to be cautious, to keep his distance from anything he couldn't read cleanly. June, though, didn't fit into any of the known patterns. She wasn't shy, but neither was she reckless. She came from ranch folk, but there was a steel in her that didn't bend easily. So, when he saw her again those days later, he wasn't surprised. She showed up at the foot of the slope near his trapping line. Said she was looking for one of her sheep that had strayed. Luca had seen no sheep, but he saw a small woven basket in her hand covered with a cloth. "It's just bread," she said before he could ask. "And some jam. You don't have to eat it, but I made too much." He didn't reach for it. "Why are you really here?" She smiled, a small one, not mocking. "Because I know you won't come to me." Luca stared at her. The wind caught her hair, lifted it gently from her shoulders. She looked perfectly at ease, as if standing on Apache land didn't matter. As if offering food to a man she barely knew was as natural as milking a goat. "I didn't ask you to follow me," he said. "No," she agreed. "You didn't." He should have turned her away, told her not to come back, but something about the quiet certainty in her face kept him from saying it. He took the basket without another word, nodded once, and turned back to the trees. When he opened it later, the bread was still warm. She came again 3 days later. This time she found him near the edge of the AO, tending a snare that had gone empty. "I brought salve," she said, holding up a tin. "In case you get scratched again." He stared at the scratch on his forearm, a shallow cut from a thorn bush the day before. "I saw the blood on your sleeve when you rode past," she added. "I noticed things." He didn't reply, but he let her dab the salve on his arm without protest. Her hands were calloused, steady, and smelled faintly of lavender. "You keep this up. People are going to talk," he muttered. "Let them," she said. "I'm not ashamed of liking someone," he blinked. That word liking felt heavier than it should have. "You don't know me. I know enough." By the 4th visit, he started expecting her. He hated that. Hated how easily she slipped into his life, like a thread pulling through a tear in old leather. June brought him a pair of gloves she'd mended. The stitching better than his own. She asked questions not just about hunting or weather, but about where he was born, what he remembered from before his family was pushed out of their old lands. He didn't answer much, but he didn't push her away either. "You don't talk a lot," she said once, sitting on a log while he sharpened a knife. "Words don't feed you," he said. She smiled. "No, but they make the nights less lonely." It didn't say it aloud, but her presence had already done that. Then came the morning she brought her father's old rifle and asked him to teach her how to shoot. Luca didn't like it. "You're kind, but not meant for killing," he told her. "I'm not trying to kill," she said. "I just want to know how not to die." He respected that. They spent the better part of the day in silence. June listening closely, adjusting her grip and stance without complaint. She missed most shots at first, but didn't whine, didn't pout, just loaded again and kept trying. By sundown, she hits the side of a pine log clean. She grinned like a girl who just lassoed the moon. "That was luck," Luca said. June cocked her head. Or maybe it was noticing. It chuckled for the first time in weeks. But with every visit, something in Luca tightened, though. They lost people before. A younger sister taken during a raid. A cousin who didn't survive the cold winter on the run. Every time someone got too close, the world seemed to find a way to rip them loose. June wasn't his to protect. She wasn't even his to want. And yet she kept showing up. One evening she brought nothing but herself. No bread, no salve, just stood at the edge of his clearing while he sat cleaning his rifle. "I don't expect anything from you," she said. "I just want you to know I'm not pretending." Luca looked up. "Pretending what?" "That this isn't real. That I don't come here because I care. That I don't think about you when I shouldn't." He put the rifle down. The shadows were long now, gold threading through the trees. "I think about you, though," he said quietly. "More than I should." She didn't smile this time, just nodded once. Then she sat beside him. Not touching, not asking, just sitting. And for the first time in a long while, Luca didn't feel alone. The first sign of trouble came with the dust, fine, dry, and bitter, rolling it off the main trail those days before the 4th of July. June had just brought the sheep down from the far pasture when she saw the wagon. It leaned to one side, an old army rig stripped of its canvas, and the man driving it slumped like a scarecrow, had pulled low. Hair got twisted before she saw his face. Jeb McMercer had come back. He hadn't written, hadn't sent word through any riders. Last she heard, he'd been working his way through the card tables of Tombstone, leaving debts and sour whiskey behind him. Now here he was, as if the past 4 years hadn't passed at all. "June back," he said as he climbed down, grinning the same crooked grin he used to wear when caught lying. "Still running this place on your own, like your mother's ghost?" June didn't answer. She stood stiff as a fence volume, one hand on the gate latch. He looked thinner than she remembered, greasier, though. His boots were cracked, and one sleeve had been sewn with string. He smelled of sweat, smoke, and cheap liquor. "I thought you were gone for good," she said. He spit in the dirt. "He was. But I got a plan. This time's different." June knew that tone. It always came before a fall. That evening, she sat across from him at the kitchen table, watching him shuffle a deck of grimy cards like it was the only thing in the world that still obeyed him. "I got into a game down in Tucson," he said between mouthfuls of stew. "Went for a while, got me a steak. Then it turned." He sighed dramatically. "You know how it goes." June stayed quiet. She did know. "What did you come for?" she asked. Jeb looked up so peace. "Why, to see my only girl, of course. And maybe to talk business." Her hands froze on the table. "What business?" He leaned in. "I've got a line on a buyer. Wants sheep, land, labor. He's opening up a ranch over by Bisbee. Needs hands and a woman to run the kitchen. It's not what you think," he added quickly when she recalled. "Is respectable. Wants help. Not well. Not what you think." "Are you trying to sell me, father?" He blinked at her like a man who's been slapped. No, not sell. Used to arrange something mutually useful." June stood so fast the chair scraped backward. "Get out." "I can't," he said. "I signed papers." She went still. "What papers?" Jeb fumbled in his coat and pulled out a folded page. June didn't touch it. She just answered. "He thinks it's done." Her father said, "We're meeting in those days." He already wired the money. June felt cold crawl up her spine. "You sold the ranch." Jeb couldn't meet her eyes. "Not just the ranch." She understood then she didn't need the paper. She saw it in his slumped shoulders in the empty space where a father's dignity should have been. That night she ran. She didn't take anything but a shawl and a knife. And she didn't head for town. She headed for Luca. It took her an hour to reach the edge of his woods, the moon high and pale above her. She called his name only once, but he was already there. He stepped from the trees like a shadow. Music, she fell into his arms before she could speak. For the first time, she let herself break. Told him everything, the papers, the man, the deal. "He thinks I'll just go," she whispered. "That he can trade me like a bottle of whiskey." Luca was silent a long time. Then he pulled her close. "You won't go," he said. She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "What can I do?" "Nothing." His voice was steady. "But I can't." The man's name was Russ Henley. Owned 3 saloons, 2 ranches, and enough men to throw weight around the county. He liked things tidy and unquestioned. When he showed up 2 days later with 2 hired guns, he expected a quiet exchange. What he got was Luca standing between June and the wagon, bow slung over one shoulder, knife at his hip, rifle strapped across his back. Henley stepped down with a frown. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. "I've paid for it." "She's not for sale," Luca said. The man behind Henley tensed. Luca didn't flinch. "She's already mine," he added, gaze steady. Hunt's breath caught. They said it like fact, not poetry. Henley glanced at her, then at Luca. "You willing to die for that claim?" eBay died for less. For a moment, no one moved. Then Henley cursed and turned back to his rig. You get the law," he barked. "You'll see what's what." Luca watched them right away, eyes like granite. Hune touched his arm. "You shouldn't have said that." He meant it. He said they left the ranch that night. Lucas said they couldn't stay not with Henley's men out for blood or bounty. They rode south at first, then east, following old Apache trails known only to a few. For days they traveled through house and desert sage, sleeping beneath most quiet trees, drinking from hidden springs. Luca taught her how to cover tracks, how to move quiet, how to feel when something wasn't right. She learned fast. Fear does that. But even fear could not keep June from asking what she needed to. "Did you mean it?" she asked one night by a small fire. "That was already yours." Luca didn't look away from the flames. "He meant that I wouldn't let anyone take you." He said, "You came to me. You chose me." She smiled softly. "And you chose me?" He met her eyes. He tried not to, but yes. Hune leaned into him then, her head resting on his shoulder. The fire crackled between them, but it was the silence that warmed her most, the kind that only came from being seen and kept. They made it as far as Dry Creek Ridge before Luca called a stop. The trail behind them had narrowed to a game path, and there was no sign of riders in pursuit. The dusk light hung low, bleeding into the chaparral like a slow spill of honey and ash. Hune was quiet as they unpacked beneath a twisted cedar, her movements steady, but warned. Luca could see the weight on her. Not just the riding, the rough food, the sleep stolen in fits and starts, but the deeper bruise, the kind that came from being given away like property from knowing your own father had done the giving. He built the fire small, just enough for warmth, not enough to draw eyes. June set out the last of the bread. They didn't speak much. The stars came out and the coyotes called from far off. He watched her in the half-light. The way she sat cross-legged, arms wrapped around her knees, hair falling loose, strong still, but dim. "You sleep," he said. "You take first watch." Hune nodded. "Wake me at midnight." It didn't. Not when the moon rose. Not when the cold crept in, and not when the shot cracked through the stillness. They came fast and sudden, 3 riders, maybe 4. Luca had heard them a heartbeat before the gunfire and shoved June flat to the ground behind the rocks. Sparks flew as the bullet struck stone, whistling past her ear. He fired once, twice from his rifle, then rolled to better cover as the horses circled wide. They weren't trying to kill. Not yet. They wanted to corral. To take. Split up. A voice called Luxtamine. June reached for the pistol Luca had given her earlier that week. Her hands shook, but she found the grip just like he'd taught her. Stay low. Breathe through the fear. Another shot tore into the cedar overhead. Bark rained down. Luca moved like smoke. One moment beside her, the next a blur in the trees, then nothing. No sound but hooves and gunmetal breath. She heard a grunt, a curse, a body fell. Then Luca was back, blood on his sleeve, knife in hand. "We run," he said. Now June didn't ask. She just followed. They ditched the horses first, sent them galloping in the wrong direction to throw off pursuit. Then they moved on foot, cutting across dry creek beds and over thorn choke hills. Hune kept pace, never asking how much farther. She trusted him. That had become her constant. Hours passed. The moon arced overhead and dropped low again. Dawn was threatening when they finally stopped at an abandoned trapper's shelter, a half-buried dugout built into the slope of a shallow canyon. Luca checked for tracks, then led her inside. She lit a match. The space was small, dry, empty, but intact. Only then did she see the blood. Luca's left arm had been grazed by flesh torn open in a long gash from shoulder to elbow. Jure hurt. He sat down heavily, breathing through clenched teeth. eBay had worse. June didn't waste time. She found her small tin of lard and pine pitch salve, tore a strip from her shirt and washed the wound with careful hands. You should have woken me, she muttered. You needed sleep. She pressed the cloth against the wound. You needed not to get shot. He gave a saw-off gun. Might have been a laugh. They stayed in the dugout 2 days. Luca slept like a man dragged through fire. June cooked, cleaned, watched the trail. She patched his coat, mended the hem of her dress, fixed the hole in his boot. She did it all without needing to be asked. The second night, he woke from a fever dream, breathing hard. She was already beside him with water. Still here, she whispered. I dreamt you were gone. I'm not. His hand found hers, rough, warm, shaking slightly. You shouldn't be, he said. June looked down at their fingers, then back at his face. But I am, and that for now was enough. By the third morning, Luca could move, not fast, but well enough to travel. They broke camp before dawn, heading north again, deeper into the hills. They passed old game trails and arroyos gone dry, found shelter in a canyon shaded by pines. There, Luca showed her how to read bird flight for danger, how to tell when the wind was about to shift. She listened with the focus of someone who needed every bit of it to live. At night, they talked, sometimes about nothing, what she liked to cook, what he missed about mountain winters. Other times, they touched the bruises of the past. I lost my mother young, June said one evening. She had soft hands like flour and soap. My father changed after she died, like the wind shifted in his chest and never blew right again. Luca nodded slowly. My sister was 8. She used to sing to the stars. One day soldiers came. They said we had to move for our safety. She got sick on the trail. Never made it to the camp. Hun reached out and took his hand. This time he didn't flinch. The fire crackled low. The world felt smaller, closer, like it could be shaped by 2 people choosing not to run anymore. Late on the 5th day, they crested a ridge and saw the outline of a stream valley below. Cotton woods lined the water and the land opened wide beneath a sky streaked gold. Lucas stopped. This is it, he said. Hune looked at him. What do you mean? A place we won't be found. Where the trail ends. Hune stepped forward, letting the wind catch her hair. She didn't ask if it was safe. She didn't need to. She felt it in her chest. Home wasn't always a house. Sometimes it was a person who kept standing between you and the fire. And sometimes it was the ride you took with them to get there. They made camp in a hollow near the stream, a quiet place ringed with cottonwoods and high stone where the wind moved slow and soft. Luca built a lean-to from stripped branches while June collected wild sage and yellow flower to dry. She hummed while she worked, not he recognized, but it carried something steady, something hers. They stayed there for 4 days. It was the longest either had gone without glancing over a shoulder. But safety on the trail is always temporary. The world has a way of catching up, even in the quietest hollows. It happened in a town called Cumberland Flats, a dry patch of dust and clapboard where miners passed through and gamblers hung on. Luca needed supplies, grain, salt, thread. Hune had insisted on coming with him. I'm tired of hiding like a secret, she said. I won't walk 3 steps behind you like I'm your shadow. So they went together, Luca quiet and alert, June in a borrowed coat and hat. They kept their heads down and their business brief. They were almost done when a voice rat sunburned and half-drunk cut across the street like a blade. Hune. Hune bugged at you? She froze. Luca turned, one hand brushing the handle of his knife. Jeb McMercer stood outside the saloon, his boots scuffed to ruin head askew. He says bloodshot and yellowed widened when he saw you. Well, hellfire, he muttered. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. June didn't move. Luca did. A step between them, his presence calm but hard. Jeb squinted. This him, the Apache you ran off with. A spat into the dirt could have had land, a stock, and a place in a real house. Instead, you end up with a half-breed outlaw living like a fugitive in the weeds. June's hands clenched at her sides. You sold me, she said softly. You signed a paper and handed me over like a mule. Jeb laughed bitterly. You think this world leaves a man choice? He lost everything. Carts, cattle, friends. All I had left was your mother's land, and you sat on it like it was yours alone. It was, June said. He kept it running. He fed the hands, paid the taxes. Do you think I meant to lose you? Jeb asked. Oh, girl, you were supposed to marry him. It was business. You were drunk, she said. You still are. A long silence passed. Luca didn't speak. He watched June let her carry her own justice. He would step in if she faltered, but she didn't. You want forgiveness? She asked. Jeb looked down. I want something. She walked closer, handed him a wrapped piece of bread from her satchel. That's all I've got for you, she said. He took it, trembling. She turned her back and didn't look again. Luca followed her out of town. Neither of them speaking until the town was a blur behind them, the air clear again. That night, June sat by the fire with her arms wrapped tight around her knees. I used to think maybe he'd come back different, she said. Like losing everything would make him remember what mattered. But some men don't change. They just sink slower. Luca stirred the fire. You gave him more than most would. He gave me my name, that's all. She fell silent, then added, when he called me June Bug. That used to mean something. Now it just feels like a bad story. He stayed too long inside. Luca looked at her across the flame. It's not your story anymore. June nodded slowly. No, it's not. In the days that followed, something between them shifted. Not love. It had already been there, quiet and growing, but certainty. June no longer waited for Luca to lead. She walked beside him, shared the map-making, the fire starting, the choosing of where to stop. They built a routine like song verses familiar, comforting, unspoken. He caught her watching him one morning as he braided rawhide. What? He asked. Used thinking, she said. Dan heroes think, she grinned. I was thinking if I were braver, I'd ask you if you wanted to stay. Not just rest, not just hide, but stay with me. Luca's fingers paused. You are brave, he said. June watched him, waiting. I already stayed, he added. She blinked once. You never said it. He didn't need to. Her breath caught in her throat. Then say it now. He looked up. The fire danced in his eyes. I'm yours, June. She stepped close, knelt beside him, and kissed him softly. Not to claim, but to say, I know. Those days later, they reached the old canyon again. The dugout was still standing. The trail behind them was cold, and for the first time, the wind no longer felt like it was chasing them. It felt like it was welcoming them home. That night, under the same stars that had once watched over Luca's sister, and under the same silence that had carried June through heartbreak, they lay together. No vows, no preacher, just skin and trust and time. They didn't speak of forever, just now. And the morning to come. The rains came late that summer, not hard, not long, but enough to dampen the dry earth and send tiny shoots of green pushing through the dust. Luca stood at the edge of the creek, watching the water rise, clear and cold, slipping over stone like memory. Behind him, June called out, her voice bright with morning. I found wild mint, enough for tea all week. She knelt beside the patch, humming to herself as she trimmed it with a knife he'd given her. The same blade she'd once carried when they were running. Now it was just another tool, not a weapon. Not anymore. They'd been in the valley 3 weeks. Long enough for silence to become comfort. Long enough for breath to match breath in sleep. Long enough for the ghosts of what came before to finally stop knocking at their backs. Their days fell into rhythm. Lucas spent the morning strengthening the shelter. He carved supports from cedar, laid stones to hold against the wind. Hune gathered wood, dried herbs, patched clouds. She planted seeds she'd saved in a pouch tied to her saddle, beans, esquisse, and a handful of flower bulbs she hadn't been able to name. "Ma gave me these," she'd said. "I don't know what they are, but they always grew near the porch." Each evening they sat by the fire. They didn't always talk. They didn't need to. The quiet between them was no longer full of questions, but understanding. Sometimes Luca carved small things, a spoon, a hair comb, the handle of a kettle. One night he shaped a small ring from leather and pressed a red stone into its center. Not polished, not even, but steady. He handed it to her without a word. Hun looked down at it, then up at him. "Is this what I think it is?" she asked. "It's not silver," he said. "I don't need silver." She slipped it onto her finger, then kissed him as if to say, "Now you can stop running, though." News traveled slow out there, but it did travel. One morning, Luca returned from a distant trading post with sugar, salt, and word from a traveling preacher who'd come through Cumberland Flats. Henley was gone. The man who, tried to buy June, who'd hunted them, had been shot in a dispute over land in Bisbee. His men had scattered. His debts caught up to him quicker than any bullet could. Hune listened in silence. When Luca was done, she stirred the coffee in her tin cup and said simply, "Then that's over." Luca watched her. "You still feel like running?" he asked. Hune shook her head. "I feel like digging a garden." That fall, the garden took shape. Hune planted in rows, careful, straight, the way her mother had taught her. Luca added wooden stakes and a rough fence to keep the mule deer out. They built a chicken pen from scavenged lumber, shared tools, shared silence. Sometimes June caught Luca watching her as she worked. Not in hunger, not in claim, just quiddo. Like a man who never expected anything beautiful to stay near him for long. She de smile. E de nod. That was how their love lived. Less in words, more in choosing. In October, a rider came, an old Apache man, long white braid down his back with eyes like sun-polished flint. He said his name was Tayo. He knew Luca's uncle, heard stories about a half-blood trapper, with a woman who once belonged to no one. They come not with warning, but with welcome. You made a place for yourselves, Tayo said. That's not running, that's surviving. He shared bread with them, stayed one night. When he left, he took no names, no promises, only nodded once at June. "She's good for you," he said to Luca. "She's good," Luca answered. That was enough. The first frost came early. Luca built a stronger roof, tighter shutters. Hune lined the bed with wool, cut from the saddle blankets. They slept curled together, breathing warmth into each other's skin, no longer thinking about who they were before the valley. One night, she asked, "Do you ever think about going back?" "Back where?" "Ton civilization. Papers and pews and store-bought shoes." Luca shook his head. "None of that ever belonged to me." Hune smiled. "Maybe not to me either." He pulled her close. "We're here now. That's enough." Spring returned soft and slow. The flowers June planted bloomed delicate white bells and yellow stars. Not strong flowers, not wild, but beautiful in their smallness. She knelt beside them one morning, brushing dirt from the leaves, and whispered, "Ma, they came up." Luca watched from the ridge above. He didn't speak, just looked at her like a man who still couldn't believe she'd chosen him. Maybe she couldn't explain it either. She just knew that when she was with him, she didn't have to prove her worth. She only had to live. Sometimes Luca would still walk to the far side of the valley and look out across the hills. The wind always came from the west, carried dust, bird song, and the smell of juniper. He'd close his eyes and remember his sister's song, his mother's voice, the sound of his own heart once hardened by loss. Then he'd turn back every time toward the small cabin with the wood smoke chimney and a woman humming over stew. The valley had given them nothing they hadn't built themselves. But that was the point. One evening, June stood at the creek, bare feet in the water. Luca came beside her, quiet as always. She slipped her hand into his. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Me? Dice everything?" He didn't answer right away. Just pulled her hand to his chest. "When I was a boy," he said, "I thought love was something that always got taken away, like a fire you couldn't hold. But you came back again and again until I stopped thinking you'd disappear." "He won't," she said. "He know." They stood there as the sun dipped below the rocks, painting the water gold. Being done, the fire waited. The garden waited. Their life imperfect, hidden, hard-earned waited. They turned back hand in hand and walked into a future of their own making. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this story. I'm truly glad you stayed with me. Your support means so much. Please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel so I can keep bringing you more heartfelt stories like this.